Hi, now let's look at the second part of monetary policy. The first question happens to be Reserve Bank of India regulates the commercial banks in the matters of. So, the first one, liquidity of assets. Is it so? Yes, I think you know RBI happened to suggest them with respect to CRSLR, branch expansion, merger of banks, winding up of banks. In fact, most of you might not be aware, until 2009-10, even setting an ATM machine, you need a prior permission from the RBI. That was the extent which RBI used to regulate the banking system. Considerably, the regulations happens to come down in the recent past. But even in the current instance, you could simply see that the extent to which the banks in India are regulated. In fact, rather than being regulated, you could say they have been overly protected by the Reserve Bank of India. So, if you look at the current scenario, the Reserve Bank regulates banks with respect to almost all of these issues. Henceforth, D happens to be the most appropriate answer. So, an increase in bank rate generally indicates increase in bank rate. So, bank rate is the rate at which RBI lends money to the banks, and you know the fact bank rate is a long-term rate of interest. When the rate of interest that RBI charges on the loans to the banks increases, then obviously you know the consequence, the interest rates or the lending rate of interest in the market rises. Isn't it? इसका मतलब है the central bank wants to go for a tight money policy. So, increase in bank rate generally indicates market rate of interest likely to fall. No, in fact, they are going to rise. Central bank is no longer making loans to commercial banks. It's not that it doesn't want to make, but it's trying to make the loans so costly. So, in fact, it's not right. Central bank is following an easy money policy. So, since the bank rate is increased, it's not easy money policy. In fact, it's a tight money policy. Henceforth, option D, the most appropriate. In the context of Indian economy, open market operations refers to. Open market operations, OMO, refers to the practice of RBI selling and purchasing government bonds. So, why would RBI sell bonds and why would RBI purchase bonds? We will be discussing later, but the practice and how bonds are priced and how bonds are traded, we have a separate video on it. You could just go through the playlist with respect to Indian economy, so then you could able to understand it. But the practice of sale or purchase of government securities by RBI to influence supply of money is what we call open market operations. Now, as in selling of a bond. So, what is the RBI doing? It is simply selling government of India's bond to the market. So, in simple terms, the RBI is selling a piece of paper to the market and simply taking money out of them. So, what do you think would be the consequence of it? Okay, it results in less amount of liquidity in the economy. So, as a result, I could say this results in a tight money policy. Whereas you are purchasing, you buy a bond from the market, it does mean you are buying a piece of paper from the market, in return putting some liquidity into the market, it results in a easy money policy, isn't it? So, in the context of Indian economy, open market offers to purchase and sale of government securities by RBI. A rise in general level of prices may be caused by. So, why would prices rise? Prices rise because of mismatch in demand and supply. And anything that results in rise in demand or results in fall in supply might result in increase in prices. They are so simple. Now, let's look at out of all these three, which results in either rise in demand or fall in supply. An increase in money supply, yes. When the money supply increases, what happens to the interest rates? They decreases and the demand increases. A decrease in aggregate level of output, of course, fall in supply would also have. An increase in effective demand, overall demand for the goods and services, definitely. So, henceforth, 1, 2, 3 happens to be. Okay, all of these statements are true. D is the most appropriate. Supply of money remaining the same when there is an increase in demand for money. So, if supply of anything remains constant and the demand of that particular good or service increases, what happens to the price of that particular good increases. So, apply the same logic here in this case. When the supply of money remains constant, supply of money remains constant or money supply remains constant and the demand for money increases. Okay, what happens? The consequence is interest rates rises. A fall in level of prices? No. An increase in rate of interest? Absolutely. A decrease in rate of interest? No, it's not going to be. An increase in level of income and employment. Rather, this increase in fall in supply of money results in increase in rate of interest. So, it would have an adverse impact upon the growth and employment. So, henceforth, even this option happens to be not the appropriate, and B happens to be the most appropriate answer for this. Which one of the following is not an instrument of selective credit control in India? I think you might have heard about selective credit control is one of the qualitative tools of monetary policy. So, regulation of consumer credit, rationing of credit, margin requirements. isn't it? So almost all of these three happens to be qualitative tools of monetary policy, and in fact what I call as selective credit control. It is the variable cash reserve ratio, which is a quantitative tool of monetary policy. This is an odd man out. This is an odd man out. So henceforth you could easily make it out. This is the one. Okay, right answer. Bank rate implies the rate of interest. Okay, so this is the rate at which, let's look at the options. Paid by Reserve Bank of India and deposits of commercial banks, no. Charged by banks on loans and advances, bank rate is implied, okay, charged by banks, okay, it's not charged by, if it is charged by central bank and loans and advances offered to the banks, it would have been true, but here in this case it is charged by banks. In such case we call it as a, okay, this is generally what we call lending rate of interest, not bank rate. Payable on bonds. Payable on bonds, who determine the rate of interest to be paid on bonds? It's the government of India. The seller of the bond determines. It's not the RBI, isn't it? So bank rate is the rate at which RBI lends money to the banks. So the obvious option happens to be the Reserve Bank of India discounts the bill of exchange. The rate at which the RBI discounts the bill of exchange. So what is a bill of exchange and how are they discount? What do you mean by discounting it? We have a video. I would suggest you to go through that particular video, okay, which is part of our playlist with respect to Indian economy and videos to UPSC. In fact, you could see the first three could be eliminated, or the obvious option is the last one. But if you need an explanation what is discounting, what is compounding, okay, and what is a bill of exchange, I would suggest, okay, go through that particular playlist and you find the corresponding video that explains you what exactly is the practice of discounting of bill of exchange and rediscounting the same bill of exchange. The accounting era of RBI is right to zoom. Okay, it's a factory question. It's a long back question, my friends. Okay, the આજકાલ you don't find such kind of questions from UPSC. Don't worry. So I think this is what we already discussed with respect to monetary policy. Decides the benchmark rates, but it's not a 12-member body. It functions on the side of Union Finance Minister. No, it's not true. So hence for the first option, right option. The lowering of bank rate by RBI leads to. So when bank rate is the rate at which RBI lends money, so when you reduce the bank rate, obviously the lending rate of interest in the market decreases. So it results in more liquidity or more supply of money, isn't it? Because the lowering of bank rate has been RBI telling the bankers, okay, I am here to lend you money at a cheaper rate of interest. So it results in more liquidity in the market. The first option itself is the appropriate option. But let's look at all the three options. Less liquidity, no, it's not wrong. Sorry, it's wrong. No change in liquidity in the market, no, it's not going to be. Generally, when banks were offered cheaper rate of interest, they would be obviously going ahead with the borrowing money so that they could end up lending this money and make money. So even this cannot be right option. Mobilization of more deposits by commercial banks. In fact, it could not happen because bank rate is simply the rate that banks could borrow, isn't it, at a cheaper rate of interest, isn't it? So this is the most appropriate option. Which of the following measures would result in increase in money supply in the economy? Purchase of government securities from the public by the central bank. So we have discussed in the previous question, okay, one of the previous question about open market operations, sale and purchase of government securities. So when RBI purchases securities from the market, what happens? RBI is simply taking the bonds from the market and in return infusing liquidity. So this explains the fact that this action results in increase in money supply, and opposite results in decrease in money supply. So this is right, and the fourth one exactly opposite is wrong. Sometimes you could use this, okay, technique of elimination. So 2 and 4, anything, wherever whichever option you find 4, that's not going to be right. So you're left with 1 and 3, and we already discussed 1 is right option. So let's look at 3. Borrowing by the government from central bank. So if government borrows, for what purpose do you think government borrows money? It is for the sake of spending, and we have this proof that whenever government makes some investment or spends for certain reasons, that results in a multiplier effect, and the amount of income that that is generated out of government spending would be a multiple of it. So at the end of the day, the purpose of government to borrow is to spend, and that would be resulting in supply of money. So henceforth the most appropriate option happens to be C. So that ends up the topic of monetary policy. And in case if you have any doubts, okay, and there might be some questions I might have missed, please do post it in the comment, okay, in the comments below, so that I would be happy to answer them. Okay.